Between 1942 and 1945, over 10,000 Allied airmen were imprisoned at Stalag Luft III in eastern Germany. German military law declared radio possession a capital offense, punishable by immediate execution. Despite this, British and American prisoners constructed approximately 30 secret radio receivers inside the camp, concealing them in soap bars, food tins, and wooden bed frames. These radios provided BBC broadcasts that maintained prisoner morale through 3 years of captivity. This is the story of how RAF radio engineers built crystal receivers from scraps, risked death to hear Churchill's voice, and kept hope alive in wooden barracks surrounded by barbed wire and machine gun towers. The soap bar felt wrong in his hands. Flight Lieutenant Oliver Thomas carved carefully through the white surface with a razor blade smuggled from the camp barber, creating cavity inside the bar large enough to hold wire coil, detector crystal, and makeshift capacitor. The soap was Red Cross issue, provided monthly to prisoners for washing. Thomas had saved 3 bars over 3 months, testing each for proper density and brittleness. Too soft, and the soap would deform during handling. Too hard and carving would crack the bar visibly. This bar was adequate. Barely. 2 hours remained before afternoon inspection. German guards conducted these searches irregularly, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, always without warning. Thomas had watched the guard rotation patterns for 6 weeks, identified that Thursday afternoons saw increased inspection frequency because Hauptmann Glemnitz personally supervised. Today was Thursday. Glemnitz would arrive at 1600 hours. Thomas needed the radio components concealed by 1545 hours to allow time for redistributing the carving debris and ensuring nothing appeared suspicious. The barracks room measured 12 feet by 15 feet, held 16 bunks arranged in double-decker configuration, housed 32 prisoners because overcrowding forced 2 men per bunk. The room had 1 window with bars, 1 door that remained unlocked during day hours, and thin walls that transmitted sound from adjacent rooms clearly. Privacy was impossible. Secrecy required coordination among all 32 occupants, any of whom could betray the operation deliberately or accidentally. Thomas worked at small table near the window, using daylight because artificial light would require explanation if guards arrived unexpectedly. Around him, other prisoners conducted normal afternoon activities: reading, writing letters, playing cards, repairing clothing. These activities provided cover. No one watched Thomas directly, but everyone remained aware of his progress and maintained predetermined signals. If guards approached, someone would cough twice. Thomas would have approximately 20 seconds to conceal components and adopt innocent activity. The crystal radio design was simple: coil of wire wrapped around cardboard tube, detector crystal scavenged from damaged electrical equipment, capacitor improvised from aluminum foil and wax paper, earphones salvaged from broken German phonograph. These components would receive AM radio broadcasts without external power, drawing energy directly from radio waves. The receiver wouldn't work well. It would be weak, require long antenna wire, pick up only strongest signals. But it would function. And strongest signal available was BBC, broadcasting from London at 500 kilowatts on shortwave frequencies. Thomas was 34 years old, a pre-war electrical engineer who had joined RAF in 1939 and trained as radio operator for Bomber Command. He had flown 23 missions as wireless operator in Lancaster bombers before being shot down over Essen in March 1942. He had bailed out successfully, been captured within hours, and spent the past 18 months at Stalag Luft III. His radio engineering expertise made him natural candidate for building secret receivers, but expertise also made him obvious suspect when German security conducted investigations. His squadron mate, Flight Lieutenant Peter Hargreaves, occupied isolation cell in camp detention barracks. Peter had been caught attempting tunnel escape 6 weeks ago. Caught because German guards discovered the tunnel through routine ground inspection with metal probes. Peter was serving 30 days isolation, solitary confinement in cell measuring 6 feet by 8 feet, receiving minimal food rations, no communication with other prisoners. Isolation was designed to break morale. German camp administration understood that prisoners in isolation often returned psychologically damaged, more compliant, less likely to participate in future escape attempts or resistance activities. Before Peter entered isolation, he had asked Thomas to keep him informed about war progress. The request was specific and desperate. Peter needed to know that war was progressing favorably, that liberation was eventual certainty rather than distant possibility. Without this information, 30 days alone in isolation cell would amplify doubts and fears into overwhelming psychological pressure. Thomas had promised to provide updates somehow. That promise now drove his radio construction work. The radio would receive BBC broadcasts reporting Allied advances. Thomas could transcribe these reports, smuggle them to Peter through prisoners who worked camp maintenance and had access to detention barracks. The promise sat heavy because maintaining it required risking execution. German military law regarding radio possession was explicit and consistently enforced. 8 weeks ago, another prisoner in adjacent compound had been discovered with radio components during routine search. The prisoner was Flight Lieutenant James Patterson, an Australian who had been attempting similar secret receiver project. Guards found wire coil hidden in his bunk. Patterson was court-martialed within 48 hours, found guilty of radio possession, and executed by firing squad 3 days after discovery. The shots had echoed across the compound at dawn. All prisoners heard them. All understood what they meant. Thomas had known Patterson, had discussed radio construction techniques with him 2 months before the discovery. They had shared information about component sources and concealment methods. Thomas felt responsible for Patterson's death because he had encouraged the radio project by providing technical advice. If he had refused to discuss construction techniques, Patterson might never have attempted building receiver, might still be alive. But Patterson also might still be suffering in isolation without information about war progress, psychological deterioration, hopelessness. There was no position that eliminated harm. The soap bar cavity was almost complete. Thomas had carved away approximately 30 cubic centimeters of soap from center of bar, creating space sufficient for holding tightly wound coil and crystal. The cavity walls were 3 millimeters thick, adequate strength for handling, but thin enough that external dimensions remained normal. He would place components inside, seal cavity with thin layer of melted soap, smooth surface to match surrounding texture. The completed bar would weigh slightly less than normal soap bar, but weight difference would be detectable only through direct comparison with standard bar, which German guards rarely conducted. His fingers cramped from maintaining precise control of razor blade. The work required extraordinary precision. Any slip would crack soap bar visibly or remove too much material from cavity walls. He had been carving for 40 minutes without pause, maintaining focus despite physical discomfort. His eyes strained from close work in marginal light. His neck hurt from hunching over table. These were minor discomforts compared to risk of execution if caught, but they accumulated into persistent distraction that made precise work harder. Outside the barracks window, other prisoners walked campgrounds during recreational period. German guards patrolled perimeter fence, rifles ready, watching for escape attempts or suspicious behavior. Guard towers overlooked the compound from 4 corners, machine guns positioned for overlapping fields of fire. The security perimeter was designed to be impenetrable. Stalag Luft III held primarily officers, most of whom had attempted escape from previous camps. German command considered these prisoners high escape risks requiring maximum security measures. The camp occupied approximately 25 hectares of cleared forest 60 miles southeast of Berlin. It held 10,000 prisoners in multiple compounds separated by barbed wire fences. Each compound operated semi-independently with own barracks, mess hall, and recreation areas. The separation prevented large-scale coordination among prisoners, while allowing Germans to manage camp with relatively small guard force. Compound isolation also meant that radio receivers built in one compound couldn't directly benefit prisoners in other compounds. Each compound needed own radio sources. Thomas's compound, North Compound, held approximately 2,000 prisoners, mostly RAF and Commonwealth aircrew, shot down over Germany. These were experienced flyers, many with university education, technical skills, and familiarity with radio and electrical systems. German camp administration recognized that technical expertise made these prisoners particularly capable of improvising forbidden equipment. Searches in North Compound were more frequent and thorough than in compounds holding enlisted personnel or less technically skilled prisoners. The choice facing Thomas now was whether to complete radio construction or destroy components before afternoon inspection. Completing the radio meant maintaining capability to receive BBC broadcasts, providing information that sustained morale, keeping promise to Peter. But completion also meant concealing operational radio, more serious offense than merely possessing components. If discovered, complete radio would prove intent rather than speculation. Execution would be certain rather than probable. Destroying components meant eliminating evidence that could trigger execution. Guards might find suspicious soap bar, wire scraps, or crystal fragments, but these individually weren't conclusive proof of radio construction. Thomas could claim innocent explanations: soap carving for passing time, wire for repairing clothing, crystal for hobby electronics. These explanations wouldn't survive serious interrogation, but they provided plausible deniability that might reduce punishment from execution to isolation. Plausible deniability was valuable when facing death penalty, but destroying components meant abandoning Peter to isolation without information, meant denying 240 prisoners in this barracks access to BBC broadcasts, meant surrendering psychological weapon that helped prisoners maintain hope despite indefinite captivity. The radio wasn't just receiving device, it was connection to outside world, proof that war continued, evidence that prisoner experience was temporary rather than permanent. Destroying it meant accepting that German isolation strategy would succeed unopposed. 240 prisoners shared this barracks block. Most wanted access to BBC News. Some participated actively in radio project by providing materials, maintaining security watch, or helping conceal components. Others participated passively by not reporting suspicious activity to guards. All accepted risks associated with radio possession because psychological benefit of receiving outside information exceeded personal risk of collective punishment if radio was discovered. At German security headquarters in Camp Administration Building, Hauptmann Hermann Glemnitz reviewed search schedules. Glemnitz was 48 years old, career Wehrmacht officer who had transferred to prisoner of war camp administration after being wounded on Eastern Front. He approached camp security with methodical professionalism, treating prisoner escape attempts and contraband manufacturing as intellectual challenges requiring systematic countermeasures. Glemnitz had conducted over 1,400 searches of prisoner barracks since assuming security position in 1942. He had discovered 47 contraband items, maps, compasses, tools, documents, and 3 radio components that hadn't yet been assembled into functional receivers. His success rate was approximately 3%, which he considered inadequate. Glemnitz believed that prisoners were successfully concealing significant contraband despite intensive search efforts. His goal was improving detection methods to uncover hidden items more effectively. Recent intelligence reports from other camps indicated that prisoners were building crystal radio receivers using improvised components. Glemnitz had studied crystal radio technology, learned that these receivers required wire coils, detector crystals, and antenna wires. He instructed guards to look specifically for unusual wire accumulations, crystal-like materials, and objects that seemed lighter than normal weight. He also ordered guards to check soap bars by pressing them, feeling for hollow spaces inside. This adaptation represented continuous evolution in camp security methods. Prisoners developed new concealment techniques. Guards learned to detect them. Prisoners adapted again. The cycle was endless. Neither side could achieve permanent advantage. Success meant temporarily staying ahead in adaptation cycle. Glemnitz understood this dynamic and accepted that some contraband would always exist despite best security efforts. His goal wasn't complete elimination, but sufficient detection to discourage most prisoners from attempting contraband construction. Glemnitz particularly focused on prisoners with technical backgrounds, engineers, radio operators, electricians. These prisoners had knowledge necessary for building complex contraband like radios. Glemnitz maintained a list of technically skilled prisoners and ensured their barracks received more frequent searches. Flight Lieutenant Thomas appeared on this list as RAF radio operator with pre-war electrical engineering experience. Glemnitz had marked Thomas's file for extra scrutiny during searches. Thomas completed the soap bar cavity at 1,520 hours. 25 minutes remained before expected inspection. He placed wire coil inside cavity, positioned detector crystal carefully to avoid damage, added improvised capacitor. The components fit tightly but adequately. He melted small amount of soap using cigarette lighter, dribbled liquefied soap over cavity opening, smoothed surface with warm blade. The seal was visible upon close inspection, but appeared normal from casual viewing distance. He placed completed soap bar in his personal storage box, alongside 3 normal soap bars. Positioned so completed bar was third from left. Memorable position that allowed quick identification without obvious marking. The box also contained shaving supplies, toothbrush, writing materials, and personal letters. Everything appeared normal for prisoner possessions. Thomas distributed carving debris, soap shavings, and wax paper scraps among 6 different waste containers in barracks, ensuring no single container held suspicious concentration. Other prisoners helped by disposing debris during routine movements around camp. Within 15 minutes, all evidence of construction work had been dispersed. The barracks appeared normal. Guards arrived at 1,550 hours, 5 minutes earlier than Thomas's prediction. Hauptmann Glemnitz entered the barracks personally, accompanied by 4 guards carrying metal probes for checking walls and floors for hollow spaces. Glemnitz conducted methodical search, examining each bunk, checking wall panels, probing floorboards. He opened Thomas's storage box, examined contents briefly, lifted soap bars to feel weight. He held third bar, the completed radio, for approximately 10 seconds, turned it over in his hands, pressed surface with thumb. The soap gave slightly under pressure but held shape. Glemnitz replaced bar in box and continued search. The search lasted 40 minutes. Guards found nothing suspicious. Glemnitz departed at 16:30 hours, apparently satisfied that this barracks contained no major contraband. After guards left, Thomas remained motionless for 5 additional minutes, ensuring no one returned unexpectedly. Other prisoners gradually resumed normal activities, maintaining casual appearance in case guards were observing through windows. That evening, Thomas assembled complete radio system in concealed location beneath barracks. He connected soap bar receiver to antenna wire that prisoners had strung inside barracks rafters disguised as clothesline. He attached earphones salvaged from broken phonograph. He tuned crystal receiver to BBC shortwave frequency by adjusting wire coil position. Reception was weak, but audible. Churchill's voice emerged from static, reporting Allied bombing campaign results over Germany, announcing continued pressure on Axis forces. Thomas transcribed key information: Allied bombing tonnage, German cities struck, estimated damage. He noted reported dates to establish credibility when sharing information with other prisoners. He listened for 20 minutes, gathering enough intelligence to demonstrate radio was receiving current broadcasts rather than repeating old information. Then he disassembled system, returned components to concealment, restored barracks to normal appearance. Over following weeks, Thomas conducted listening sessions twice weekly, timing them for periods when guard presence was minimal and when BBC broadcasts reported significant war developments. He shared transcribed information with Compound Commander, who verified details matched other intelligence sources and authorized wider distribution. News spread through camp via word-of-mouth network that prisoners called the Bush Telegraph. Within hours of any BBC broadcast, hundreds of prisoners knew key information without knowing specific source. The psychological impact of receiving outside information was substantial. Prisoners who learned about Allied advances maintained better morale, participated more actively in camp activities, showed fewer signs of psychological deterioration. German camp administration noticed these morale improvements and suspected prisoners were receiving unauthorized information but couldn't identify specific sources. They intensified searches but continued finding nothing because concealment methods had evolved ahead of detection capabilities. Flight Lieutenant Peter Hargreaves completed his isolation sentence and returned to regular barracks. Thomas provided him with transcribed BBC reports covering the 30 days of isolation. Peter learned that Allied forces had continued advancing, that German positions were under increasing pressure, that liberation was eventual certainty. This information restored Peter's psychological stability and enabled him to resume normal participation in camp life. The promise had been kept. Other prisoners in the compound requested similar service. Thomas began regular broadcasts distribution, providing weekly summaries of BBC reports about war progress. The summaries were carefully written to be memorable without requiring written records. Prisoners memorized key facts and redistributed them through word of mouth, creating information network that German security couldn't fully map or interdict. The radio operation continued for 18 months without discovery. During that period, Thomas conducted approximately 150 listening sessions, transcribed thousands of words of BBC broadcasts, distributed information to estimated 500 prisoners directly and several thousand indirectly through Camp Information Network. The operation provided continuous connection to outside world that sustained prisoner morale through extended captivity. In March 1944, Stalag Luft III prisoners conducted massive tunnel escape known as the Great Escape. 76 prisoners crawled through tunnel extending beyond camp perimeter, emerging in forest outside security fence. German forces captured 73 escapees within days. Gestapo executed 50 recaptured prisoners as deterrent against future escape attempts. The executions shocked Allied governments and prompted war crimes investigations that continued after German surrender. The Great Escape wasn't directly related to radio operations, but the two activities were linked through shared infrastructure of prisoner cooperation. The same organizational networks that supported secret radio construction also supported tunnel digging operations. The camp commander, who authorized radio intelligence distribution, also approved tunnel escape planning. The prisoners who maintained security watch for radio listening sessions also maintained watch for tunnel diggers. Both activities required sustained prisoner coordination and willingness to accept risks for collective benefit. German security response to Great Escape included intensified searches throughout camp. Guards conducted more frequent inspections, used more sophisticated detection equipment, interrogated more prisoners about suspected contraband. Thomas's radio operation survived this increased scrutiny through combination of improved concealment and reduced usage frequency. He conducted listening sessions less often, distributed information more carefully, maintained stricter operational security protocols. The soap bar radio remained concealed until camp liberation in April 1945, as Soviet forces advanced toward Berlin. As liberation approached, German guards abandoned Stalag Luft III rather than face Soviet troops. Prisoners took control of camp, awaited Allied forces, and eventually were repatriated to Britain and America. Thomas carried the soap bar radio with him during repatriation, intending to preserve it as memento of captivity experience. After returning to Britain, Thomas donated the radio to RAF Museum as example of prisoner improvisation under extreme constraints. Museum staff examined the device, confirmed it was functional crystal receiver capable of receiving AM broadcasts, documented construction techniques for historical record. The radio appeared in museum exhibition about prisoner of war experience during World War II, illustrating how technical knowledge could be adapted for survival purposes. Museum documentation noted that crystal radios like Thomas's represented broader pattern of prisoner technical improvisation. Prisoners at multiple camps built similar receivers using varying designs and components. Some used galena crystals scavenged from electrical equipment. Others used silicon carbide or copper oxide junctions. All achieved same result: radio reception without external power, concealed from German security in ordinary objects. The psychological importance of radio access extended beyond specific information received. Prisoners who knew that outside world continued, that war progressed, that liberation was coming eventually, maintained better mental health than prisoners isolated from information. German isolation strategy assumed that cutting prisoners from outside contact would reduce escape attempts and resistance activities by creating psychological pressure. Secret radios undermined this strategy by maintaining connection that preserved prisoner morale despite physical confinement. Post-war interviews with Stalag Luft III survivors consistently emphasized importance of BBC broadcasts for maintaining hope. Multiple survivors specifically mentioned radio receivers as crucial factor in their psychological survival. They described periods without radio access as particularly difficult, marked by increased anxiety, depression, and conflicts among prisoners. They described periods with radio access as more stable, characterized by improved morale and stronger camp community cohesion. Hermann Glemnitz survived the war and testified at war crimes tribunals about Stalag Luft III administration. His testimony confirmed that camp security had suspected prisoner radio operations, but never successfully identified all receivers or neutralized information distribution networks. Glemnitz acknowledged that prisoners had consistently outmaneuvered security measures through creative improvisation and effective organizational coordination. He noted that technical education of Allied aircrew prisoners made them particularly capable adversaries in contraband construction competition. Glemnitz expressed professional respect for prisoner engineering skills, while maintaining that camp security had operated within Geneva Convention requirements. He distinguished between legitimate security measures, searches, inspections, reasonable punishments, and illegal measures like execution of recaptured escapees. He testified that executions after Great Escape were ordered by Gestapo over protests from camp administration. This testimony helped establish that regular Wehrmacht camp staff were not responsible for war crimes that Gestapo committed. The broader history of Stalag Luft III encompasses multiple interconnected narratives: tunnel escapes, radio operations, theater productions, educational programs, and daily survival under difficult conditions. The soap bar radio represents one thread in this complex tapestry. It demonstrates prisoner technical capability, organizational sophistication, and psychological resilience. It shows that captivity didn't mean passive acceptance, but active resistance through information gathering and distribution. Flight Lieutenant Thomas returned to civilian life after the war, resumed electrical engineering career, eventually became professor at Technical University. He rarely discussed his prisoner experience publicly, considering it simply what circumstances required. When historians interviewed him in 1970s about radio operations, he emphasized collective effort rather than individual achievement. He noted that radio construction required materials donated by many prisoners, security maintained by dozens of watchers, and information distribution coordinated by camp organization. Individual technical skill was necessary but insufficient. Success required community cooperation. The RAF Museum exhibition, including Thomas's soap bar radio, receives thousands of visitors annually. Museum interpretation emphasizes that object represents not just technical cleverness, but also determination to maintain psychological connection with outside world despite physical confinement. The soap bar appears ordinary until visitor reads explanation describing hidden radio components and risks prisoners accepted to receive BBC broadcasts. This contrast between ordinary appearance and extraordinary purpose makes artifact powerful educational tool. Museum staff note that younger visitors often have difficulty understanding why radio reception required such extreme measures. Modern visitors live in a world where information access is ubiquitous, constant, and unrestricted. They haven't experienced information deprivation as weapon, haven't lived in conditions where news about outside world was forbidden under threat of execution. Museum interpretation attempts to convey these historical circumstances through contextual explanation and comparison with modern information environment. The technical specifications of Thomas's crystal radio appear simple by modern standards: wire coil, crystal detector, rudimentary capacitor, no amplification, no selectivity beyond what single-tuned circuit provided. But these simple components performed crucial function in specific historical context. They received broadcasts that informed prisoners about war progress, maintained connection with outside world, undermined German psychological isolation strategy, and contributed to prisoner survival through extended captivity. The strategic significance of prisoner radio operations extended beyond individual camp morale. British intelligence recognized that maintaining prisoner morale reduced German security effectiveness because prisoners with hope were more difficult to manage than prisoners without hope. Prisoners with information about Allied advances believed liberation was coming and maintained discipline and organization. Prisoners without information sometimes collaborated with German authorities to improve personal circumstances, undermining camp cohesion. British government therefore supported prisoner radio operations through coded messages in BBC broadcasts specifically directed at POW camps. These messages provided intelligence about Allied operations, instructions for escape attempts, and general encouragement. Prisoners who successfully received these broadcasts gained advantage over prisoners who lacked radio access. Camp organizations therefore prioritized radio construction as strategic asset rather than merely comfort measure. The final accounting of radio operations at Stalag Luft III remains incomplete because many receivers were destroyed before liberation to to avoid potential German retaliation as war ended. Thomas's soap bar radio survived because he kept it concealed through final days and carried it during repatriation. Other prisoners destroyed their receivers or abandoned them during evacuation. Exact number of operational receivers during peak period remains unknown, but estimates range from 30 to 50 across all compounds. These receivers collectively provided BBC broadcasts to thousands of prisoners over 3 years of camp operation. The broadcasts sustained morale, provided accurate information about war progress, and maintained prisoner connection with outside world despite physical confinement. The strategic value of maintaining this connection justified risks prisoners accepted to build and operate receivers. Execution was possible consequence, but psychological collapse was probable consequence of living without information in indefinite captivity. Oliver Thomas's decision to complete soap bar radio, despite inspection risk, represented calculation that psychological benefit exceeded personal danger. He built radio to keep promise to isolated friend, to provide morale support to compound prisoners, and to resist German isolation strategy through information distribution. The calculation proved correct. Radio operated successfully for 18 months, provided broadcasts to hundreds of prisoners, sustained morale through extended captivity, and survived to become historical artifact documenting prisoner technical capability and psychological resilience. The soap bar containing hidden crystal radio sits in RAF Museum display case, preserved as example of prisoner improvisation under extreme constraints. Visitors can examine the bar's exterior, which appears like normal Red Cross issue soap, yellowed from decades but otherwise unremarkable. Museum interpretation explains that interior originally contained wire coil, crystal detector, and capacitor, though these components were removed for preservation purposes. The soap bar's significance isn't in its appearance, but in what it represented. Connection maintained despite barriers, information distributed despite prohibitions, hope sustained despite captivity. That connection came with calculated risk. Every listening session carried possibility of discovery. Every information distribution created chance of betrayal. Every day of operation extended exposure to German security. Thomas and other radio builders accepted these risks because alternative, living without information in indefinite captivity, carried greater psychological cost than risk of execution. The decision wasn't heroic in conventional sense. It was practical calculation about which risks were bearable and which weren't. The soap bar represents this calculation. Ordinary object concealing extraordinary purpose. Simple materials adapted for critical function. Everyday item transformed into resistance tool. The transformation required technical knowledge, careful planning, sustained cooperation, and willingness to accept consequences if discovered. These requirements characterized much resistance activity during war. Not dramatic confrontation, but persistent small actions that collectively undermined occupation and captivity systems. Thomas's radio operated successfully because it stayed hidden in plain sight. Soap bar looked like soap bar. Wire appeared like clothesline. Antenna resembled innocent installation. Only those who knew specifically what to look for could identify components as radio system. German security searched intensively but repeatedly missed hidden receiver because concealment was too effective and context was too ordinary. Security expected radios to look like radios. They didn't expect radios to look like soap. This lesson applied broadly to resistance operations. Best concealment made forbidden object appear so ordinary that searchers overlooked it not through failure to search, but through failure to recognize what they saw. Thomas's engineering achievement wasn't building crystal radio from scraps. Many engineers could do that. His achievement was concealing radio so effectively that repeated searches by competent security officers never found it. Concealment was harder than construction. The barbed wire fences surrounding Stalag Luft III were designed to contain prisoners physically. The radio prohibition was designed to contain them psychologically. Physical containment succeeded. 10,000 prisoners remained confined until liberation. Psychological containment failed. Prisoners maintained connection with outside world through secret receivers, sustained hope through BBC broadcasts, resisted isolation through information distribution. The soap bar radio was instrument of this resistance. Simple device, profound impact, hidden in plain sight, working until liberation. Simple device, profound impact, hidden in plain sight, working until liberation.